So I was kind of dreading these, but we'll see how they go. They're very large and kind of cool. That's the back side. And you can see that they're cut at the hub so that you'll be able to twist the trailing edges and hopefully, make a twist into the whole propeller. Those are the hubs. And then there is the center piece that goes around. I've never seen props made this way, so it's kind of interesting. Because usually you just put prop blades, butt them up against the center piece, and they tend to look kind of dumb. These, if they work, will actually look pretty cool. So the first thing I did was take this piece, the center piece, and roll it around to induce a curve, because this has to be glued, and the diameter is going to end up being the diameter of that white part on the props, or what the hub looks like. And I see that little line? That's where I've practiced, and I know that if I put a little glue there and I put the edge of the strip there and start gluing there, I'll end up coming around and butting up against the rest of the color. I'll have the right diameter. So you have to just sort of pay attention to that. So I get that started and put it in there and kind of glue it and hold it in place. And then once that's in there, then I'm kind of squeezing it shut there a little bit. And then once it's in there, I'm able to then roll the rest of it around, and you'll notice that it matches right up with that white piece. You can see it matches up right to the edge. It'll just cover the white. And once I know that's right, then I add my glue all the way around on that inside piece, and then go ahead and wrap it the rest of the way. Has to be, it's pretty critical this is the right diameter, of course, because this is how your blades have to slide over and across this on their trailing edges to induce this helical curve in the props to make them look cool. And so that has to line up just like that. You can see it goes right up to the edge. And as long as you cut cleanly and accurately, shouldn't have too much trouble. Squeeze that shut so that it's ready to go. I squeeze all the way around to make sure I've got a nice glue joint. And that's it. Now, that is the circular piece. And just to reiterate what happens, ultimately what happens is these go on like that. And it'll be glued on like that with the center, and then the other piece will go on the other side. So the first thing I do, they don't say to do this, but I assume that the blades are supposed to have, some sort of a curve in them. So I took a suitable implement. I used this, and I also used a little piece of a handle of a little skinny nail file, and just squished it along my patented inexpensive little little piece of that backing is made for actually quilts and or knit things that you knit to try to hold them out while they dry. But this is going to ultimately come together, and those curves, I'm trying to show you those curves on the propeller blades themselves, and they will glue on the edges, and that's where we'll start. So first thing I do is take this little hub piece, and I go ahead and put glue on one side, and I glue it to one of the propeller backings there that I've made. This part, I don't know, this is the way I'm doing it. I don't know if there's a better way to do this or not. This seemed to work. The key here, though, is to, once you put it on there, it's got to be centered, of course. But you got to make sure when I'm doing it, I'm testing and making sure that each of those trailing edges will actually curve over and around. If you don't have it centered, of course, they'll block and they won't move. So you make sure those are good. And once you can move them all around, then you just let it dry. Now what I decided to do, because this is really kind of hard to do, I think. This is the hardest part so far. I put a little glue on the very tip, and then there's no particular blade that fits with another particular blade. But I just line them up very carefully. They fit really nice in terms of you don't have a lot of overlap. Any overlap is your own fault. But I very carefully grab these, and I'm just kind of cupping them and letting the glue do the work. I end up trying to squeeze the very edges, because again, these have a curve to them, and there's no internal piece. This is just the paper. So once you make them convex, you don't want to squish those between your fingers and flatten them again. So you make sure that you get the edges, the tip, and just around the edges glued real nice on that tip. And then assuming everything is correct, that other side is next. So the opposite the opposite prop blade, I went ahead and put some glue on that. Again, not along the whole length, just near the tip, because I figured to do this in increments, maybe it would turn out. Again, having never made propellers like this, it was kind of an interesting process. So again, and this is, this is boring, it's the same thing, but notice I'm very carefully touching the edges. I'm kind of cupping them and kind of inducing them to touch each other. I am not pressing hard. And what I'm doing is trying to make sure that they are accurate, and again, there's no overlap in the back. And again, this kit seems to be very well done, so as long as you cut it right, you're pretty much assured of having nice, even pieces. And you just keep rolling around and doing that. So I do that to the other two. And finally, once they're all glued and dried, now I went in, because now I know it's centered, I hope. Now I put glue in on the hub, kind of messily here, kind of a doorknob. And that is going to allow me now to adhere the other side of the prop to that middle piece. So I'm just putting glue all the way around where it's going to touch, and then I just give it a little squeeze and make sure that it glues. And then the next part is the part that's really dicey, which is trying to actually make these things take a shape. Here I'm just cleaning up some glue that squirted out. But now again, because these things are cut at the hub so that they will curl up and you'll meet that edge, watch what happens. It's actually kind of ingenious, but it isn't perfect. I mean, I didn't make them perfect, I'll put it that way. I'm putting glue all the way along that edge, and then I take my tweezers and I very carefully start to close these together, my human tweezers there. But then I take my regular tweezers and close them, and then when I get to the hub, I grab that piece and I pull it up so that it touches the trailing edge. And it seems like it's not going to work. When you do this, it's like you pull the whole prop out of balance. It bends funny. It's rippled. It's like, oh no, this isn't going to work. But if you tease it together like that and let it dry, lo and behold, it actually it looks pretty good. Now, there's 4 blades to do. I think 3 of mine turned out pretty good on this side when it was all said and done, and one of them has a little bit of bagginess to it, but I'm willing to overlook that. So now I'm checking the next one, making sure that it will move, which it does. If it doesn't move, I take an X-Acto blade and kind of cut a little extra piece to make sure that I can push it up against that trailing edge. It's better to have a little bit more movement and have it be loose than not. And again, start bringing that together, and we're doing just one end of the blade each time. The other side, we wait for this side to dry, and then we do the very same thing on the opposite side of the same propeller blade. Because if you do it too soon, you'll pull these off. Because there's a lot of tension here when you squeeze these together. Again, it amazes me. I don't think the paper can actually physically do this, what I'm forcing it to do. But lo and behold, it does. Part of it is maybe the glue gets it wet a little bit. But I'm amazed how this turns out, because you wouldn't think it would work. On the directions, you look at it and you go, yeah, that makes sense. But then when you really try it, it's kind of scary. So I just continued all the way around, and I continue doing the back side of each blade in turn. So this part, I just saved the last one to show you. So this is the part that is going to form the rest of the blade. So everything has dried real well, and then this is the other side of a particular blade. And this is the last piece. So you just do the same old thing. You add your glue along the edges. Again, it's repetition, but I think it's good for people to see, because again, it isn't easy to do. This is definitely a difficult thing. And I go ahead and I squeeze them shut. And as you squeeze, again, the prop blades are deforming a little bit, but when you're all said and done, you can kind of jigger them a little bit, straighten them out, and you do end up ultimately with a 3-dimensional prop that has a helix to it that actually looks pretty dang good. Again, it's better. Here I am tweaking things, making sure that, because at first they're kind of funny, and tweak them when the glue is still a little wet, because as you do this, and as it dries, it'll become a very solid structure. At first, it's going to be a little scary. And you can see there are places where there's white showing through where I didn't do such a good job. But I'm really just making sure each of the leading and trailing edges are connected at that hub, and they're sort of diagonal along there. They got a pitch to them, just like a real propeller. Then I go ahead and I'm going to put on these little hub covers there. By the way, there's been holes poked in each of these, in both sides of the prop, and also in those little extra paper hub pieces. So just putting a little glue on there, grab it, in my case with some saliva and a knife, and just pop it on there. Again, everything is very nice with this model. The holes line up automatically. You can make sure. I took this little piece of 1/16 aluminum tubing, which has been my prop shaft, by the way. There's a rolled tube that you're supposed to use, but I thought I'd use that. That's what I'm going to use. Turn it over, do the same thing. Now you notice there's some white showing through where I didn't do a good job. That's okay, because we can go back with a little bit of that color and do that on the edge, and no one will know. It'll be good enough. Same thing, put a little glue on there, dab that on, and then you just sort of stand back and look at it. Here I just make sure, I have a little bit here. I'm just making sure that the thing does go through and it's straight, which it does. Yeah, I'm kind of impressed that they turned out as well as they did, because I was really not looking forward to this. And again, what I did later off screen is touch up the edges with some paint. I ended up cutting the piece of aluminum tubing and putting a shaft in it, and it looks just like the other one. And here's the other one that I finished last night. I can do about one of these a night, otherwise I go crazy. But there's the aluminum tubing, and that's going to go in there. And Bob's your uncle. You got 2 propeller blades for the Vimy, or 2 propellers for the Vimy. Again, very pleased with how these turned out.